the thing we grew up on is what we want. And it's oftentimes the art forms move on and move in advance in ways that we kind of miss the old version of it. But they do make movies like they used to, and I think they're better than ever. The ability to put things on screen has just never been like this.
There clearly, though, has been some change over the past, I don't know, what do you want, decade, 20 years, 30 years, where mid-size movies for adults have not quite vanished, but they own a much smaller share of the movie marketplace.
That's 100% true. I mean, the business has become very stratified. Either movies are gigantic spectaculars built to make billions of dollars, or they're very small independent film, and there's not much in the middle anymore. And there was a time when the middle was where all the vibrancy of filmmaking was. And I think we've changed a lot. Not just the business of films have changed a lot, but human beings have changed a lot. As much as I love the movie Nashville, what audiences sit with Nashville today in big numbers? It's hard to say.
Yeah, as one of the movies I actually wrote down, like, could Nashville be made today? Could The Conversation, another movie I love, be made today? Breaking Away, like a movie that suddenly becomes, probably not made for much money, and all of a sudden everybody in the country goes out and sees it. Would those movies get made today as movies?
I think they do, and I think you say as movies because you'd see the way that television has kind of encroached into the land that used to be totally occupied by movies. So the real rich character stories, character-driven drama, that's all happening in big, big ways on television. And a lot of the people who were writing for films have moved into writing for television. So it's possible that those things are just playing out more likely as television series now.
One of the issues, and almost everybody who's been involved in this, was involved in this business in the 90s and is still involved in it, will say this, is that, you have a $25 million idea, it's a good idea, but that would have meant then you $25 million on the production, another $25 million to get everybody excited to go see it, right? To market the movie. And then, so you're looking at $50 million. That number is, let's say, conservatively $80 million now. If it's in theaters, the thought is it's not really going to make that money back unless it's something that people already know, like the Marvel movies.
Well, it's certainly higher risk today because of all the expenses that you just talked about. And I do think it's a very different business than it was, when I grew up and going to the theaters on a summer afternoon. I had a few choices, and they were all kind of much more broad than they are today. And they certainly were more grounded than they are today. And I do think that seeing a movie in the theater has become much more of a thrill ride than it has become an act of storytelling.
Inevitably, right? There's some loss of originality when the risk gets so high that people are afraid to take it.
Well, look, I will be self-serving here and point to Amelia Perez as probably one of the more creative and out-of-the-box films of the year. And maybe of the last several years that I've seen, of a movie that creates a story in the real world that's told in a very heightened way, with kind of a spectacular, fantastic realism that goes into it, and those performances and the music and the cinematography and the edit. Everything about what Jacques Audiard did in that movie is phenomenal. And kind of the counterpoint to what you just said, that no one's taking chances with risky things anymore.
But we're taking less chances. Would you agree with that?
For sure. And that's why they really need to be celebrated when that happens.
Do you want to see movie theaters succeed?
I would love to see movie theaters succeed because I personally like to go to them. I think that there's a lot of economic challenges to that business. And I think if you look at the attendance since the advent of television, the attendance to theaters continues to drop, and it gets the business gets lifted up by raising ticket prices. But in general, I think that people have a lot of choice, and that choice typically is a good thing, and it's typically good for the thing that it's serving. So I think if you have the opportunity to see a movie, removing choice from you, I don't think is going to make the business healthier.
You and I, when we were growing up, could not have imagined a world where when you sat in front of the TV, basically at your fingertips were 83% of every television show ever made and 71% of every movie ever made. What has that done to us, that choice, that much choice? How has that changed who we are? Maybe this is a question for a sociologist, but
Yeah, I think it actually has made our ability to do a lot of things better. So I think it's the fact that you can have a reference point. I do believe in this theory that all films are in conversation with one another at some level. And the ability to go back and see where this came from or that came from, what movies influence which movies, I think that being able to do it, that used to be a very elite thing. If you didn't live in New York and LA, you had no access to these movies ever. All the studios fought licensing their movies to television, thinking that people would stay home. But I feel like if you know what consumers want and you don't give it to them, that's a suicide mission. So I think in this way, where when I go to a dinner party and I talk about a movie, there's a pretty good chance that I'm going to find it when I get home.
Right.
Where that was just never the case before. And I think that that's generally good for the art form. It's definitely good for the business.
is there a way that we can give people an experience at home that comes at least vaguely close to the experience they got in theaters?
I think it comes down to the individual. Nothing makes me crazier than sitting in a movie theater seat and the person next to me is like takes their phone out, and it happens all the time now.
All the time.
It used to be bad when a phone would ring. Now they'll take the call sometimes.
It's insane.
So
It's insane.
It's insane.
Yeah.
So for me, it is how many distractions are pulling away from you. When the movie is on, when the movie is working for you, you can't be distracted from it at home or at the theater. I think you may have to be more proactive about it at home. I personally am. Like if I sit down to watch a movie that I've been dying to watch, I will take my phone out and put it in the other room. Because I know I can't stop. I can't help myself. I'm going to look at it too. And I hope that nobody talks to me, and I hope that nobody knocks on the door. But I do think that creating an environment at home to where you can just really focus on something is really it's different. Because some people would say that we're just being old guys, and part of it. My wife loves to look up who that is and what they did while we're watching the movie.
Yeah, I can't. I'm like, wait, that guy was in this. I can't remember his name. And then
I can wait till the end, but for her, it's part of the experience. She enjoys it quite a bit. So I think you have to just do it in the ways that make the most sense for you. For you to have the most experience. And if you're doing it with your partner or friends or spouses, you've got a lot of different people who have a lot of different needs on that film.
So when people say they don't make them like they used to, the answer is, well, yeah, they don't.
Yeah.
But maybe they never did.
I'd say they don't make them like they used to. In some ways, thank goodness. And in other ways, we have a lot to learn from the past.
And when the greatest era in American movies, which began in 1967, and I would argue ran through 1976. Not that there wasn't good stuff after that, but that's when we got Star Wars and Close Encounters in 77.
Yeah, that big summer blockbuster changed a lot.
Many people saw those movies coming out in 1967. Graduate, Bonnie and Clyde, certainly. Cool Hand Luke, In the Heat of the Night, and thought, they're not making movies like they used to.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? These are too great. French Connection, and they saw it and they were like, this is too gritty, too violent. This is uncomfortable. They're not making movies like they used to. Is that part of just evolution, the evolution of this art?
Yeah, and it's what we're exposed to in life. The more we see, the more we know, the more we look back on things as they were. These things were great for the time, but they don't work today. Some of those great movies that we just talked about, there's 20 others that didn't age very well. And I look back now and think about things like the summer blockbuster being an incredible experience for some people, going and standing in line to watch Star Wars over and over again. I relate to you a memory of mine seeing Jaws in the movie theater, which is unreplicable. Like I've never had that. I'll never have that experience on my couch, but I'll have a ton of great movie experiences. And for me, as someone who really loves movies, I grew up in Phoenix, Arizona, when it was a very small town. Didn't have a single movie theater that didn't show mainstream movies. So there was a Valley Art Theater in Tempe, about an hour and 15 minutes on the bus, where I would get in the bus with a friend sometimes, and we'd go across town to go see any movie that wasn't in English, that maybe was in black and white, that might have been a documentary, or it may have just been a John Sayles movie that otherwise didn't exist in Arizona. This before the video store. So then when the video store opens, it's like, oh my God, all those movies that I never had access to are right here. And then over time, the video stores became the same kind of hit-driven machines that theaters did. And then there came streaming. So there's all this opportunity, I think, to get the history of this art form, the history of storytelling, the history of humans on the screen. If the screen is gigantic here, or good size at home, or even small on your phone. I don't think it's sacrilege for someone to watch a great movie on their phone. I'd much rather them do that than not watch movies at all.